The bill was folded twice, the way you fold money you want a man to feel before he counts it. My brother pressed it into my palm in front of 40 people and told the room to give it up for the valet. They gave it up. He raised his phone to catch my face, the way he always caught my face, and I let him have the shot. Then I thanked him. I said it was generous, and I turned and handed the 20 to the kid who had actually parked the cars because he had earned it and I hadn't. That got a smaller laugh, a confused one. I am the younger son. While the room was still deciding whether that was allowed to be funny, I set my phone face up on the cake table next to the knife, and I turned it so the speaker pointed at the guests. My brother's voice came out of it. It was not the voice he used at parties. The laugh he had started did not make it to the end of the first sentence. A few hours before that, I turned off the highway onto a street where the houses had all been built to look like they disapproved of one another. Dean's was the newest thing on it. Up at the top of the cul-de-sac, 3-car garage, a lawn, so even it looked billed by the square foot. There was a boy at the curb in a rented vest, parking cars with a flashlight in each hand, waving me into a spot like he was landing a plane. He couldn't have been 17. I gave him the keys and told him where I'd want them at the end of the night, and he nodded like a man being trusted with something, because a kid working somebody else's driveway on a Saturday is a person I understand better than anyone I was about to walk in on. I had my mother and father in the back seat. I'd driven them myself, the way I drove them to most things now, and I came around to my father's side and gave him my arm down to the curb because the step was high and his knees were 72 years old and done pretending otherwise. My mother took my other arm without being asked. Through the tall front windows, I could already hear the party, 40 people laughing at something, the sound coming out through the glass soft and expensive, and it seemed to me the house had been built for exactly that sound and not much else. Dean opened his own front door before I reached the top step, which meant he'd been watching the driveway roll up on a screen somewhere inside. He opened it wide, both arms out, the way a man presents a car he is giving away on television.
There he is, whole family in one car. Very efficient. You should have charged them for the ride.
He pitched it loud enough for the entryway to hear, and the entryway gave him the laugh he'd asked for. My mother patted the back of my hand. I walked her and my father past him into the light and the smell of catered food.
Hey, before you sit down, do me one favor, little brother. Grab an apron off the hook there and make yourself useful. Caterer's a man short, and those chairs out on the patio aren't going to carry themselves in.
He already had his phone up. He'd had it up since the door, held at that little downward angle he always found, the lens on my face, and I didn't need to check to know it was recording because it was recording whenever it was pointed at me. That was the one dependable thing about my brother. There are hours of me on that phone carrying things into rooms, and not 1 second of anyone thanking me for it. I did not take the apron, so I walked toward the phone instead of away from it. I put my arm around Dean's shoulders, pulled him in until we were cheek to cheek inside his own frame, and I smiled the way 2 men smile when they're about to pose for a real estate sign. Get us both in, and people love a before and after. For a second, the man behind the phone didn't know what to do. The shot he'd built needed me small and off to one side, bent under something, and instead there he was, grinning next to a brother who looked thrilled to be standing beside him. He lowered the phone. A few guests near the door laughed. A real laugh, a surprised one, the first honest sound I'd heard in the house, and I watched him locate it, the way he located every laugh in a room to learn whose side it was on.
Same old comedian.
He clapped me between the shoulders hard enough to move me a step.
Go on, go sit with Mom and Dad. Somebody's got to keep the old folks company.
That was the one order he gave me all evening that I had already meant to follow. I walked my parents to the long couch by the window, set my father on the end where he could see the whole room, and sat down between him and my mother, so that whatever the night decided to become, it would have to come through me before it reached either of them. The house was big, and it was working overtime to say so. Everything in it was a month old, the leather still tight, a painting still leaning against the wall where nobody had hung it yet, a wine fridge lit up blue like an aquarium. Guests drifted between the kitchen island and the patio doors, telling Dean it was gorgeous, telling him he'd earned it, and he took each of those the way a man takes a debt he's been owed a long time. My father watched him do it. My mother watched my father. My father had spent his whole 72 years being a man who paid for things himself and never once mentioned the bill. He sat on the couch with his hands folded on his good trousers and let the room happen around him. And I watched him watch his older son gather up the compliments, and I could not tell from the side of his face whether what sat there was pride or the first edge of a question. My mother pressed close against his shoulder. She had dressed for this. In the blue she saved. Whatever else the evening turned out to be, those two people were the reason I had come, and the reason I had already decided I was not going to sit through this one the way I had sat through the others. Danielle came through with 2 glasses of something pale and folded them into my parents' hands, then crouched down to my mother's level and said something I didn't catch that made my mother laugh for the first time in a week.
I put you 3 by the window on purpose. Best seats in the house.
She said it to me on her way back up, and she meant it, and she didn't quite hold my eye while she said it. I filed that, where I file things, and I let her go. A couple around Dean's age drifted over to admire the couch and the view, and Dean steered them toward us by their elbows like they were coming to see an exhibit.
This is my little brother, the reliable one. Anything in this family needs lifting, driving, or fixing. He's your man. Every family should keep one on hand.
The woman smiled down at me the way you smile at a helpful dog.
He drove Mom and Dad here himself tonight, door to door, didn't you?
I did.
Salt of the earth, this guy. We'd all fall apart without him.
Somebody ought to write that down.
He kids. He's a kidder.
The couple laughed, not entirely sure at whom, and drifted off toward the blue light of the wine fridge. Dean watched them go, pleased, then dropped onto the arm of the couch beside me with his own glass, loose now, warm, enjoying the size of his evening.
You come alone?
I came with Mom and Dad.
That's not what I asked, and you know it. A guy your age, 38 years old, out driving around by yourself half the night. He swirled the glass and looked at me over the rim of it. You still doing that? The delivery thing?
I ran a night delivery route.
See, I could never. Somebody's got to, I guess. He smiled to take the curse off it. No offense.
None reached me.
You're touchy tonight.
I'm the same as always. You're just louder in a bigger house.
Ha, write that one down too. He leaned in closer. How's the apartment, anyway? Still that place over on Linden?
Still there.
God, I couldn't do it. 1 bedroom, isn't it?
It's enough room for 1 man and a coffee maker.
That's the part that worries me about you. You've built a whole personality out of needing nothing. It isn't healthy, wanting that little. People start to assume there's something wrong with a man.
People have assumed that about me a long time. I made my peace with the reviews.
See that right there? You say a thing like that, and I honestly can't tell whether you're joking.
Neither can I. It keeps things interesting. He laughed for real at that one, and for a second it was almost the 2 of us again. 2 brothers at a party. Then he remembered where he was standing and who was watching him stand there, and he found his thread again.
You remember the 4th of July at Mom and Dad's? Whole family out on the lawn, and there's you in the kitchen the entire night, washing dishes nobody asked you to touch. He shook his head, delighted with the picture. That's you in 1 photograph. That's the whole guy.
Somebody did the dishes. The party ran fine because of it.
Nobody remembers the dishes, little brother. They remember whose name is on the invitation.
I've noticed you keep close track of the invitations.
Damn right I do. Somebody in this family has to. He settled back, warming to himself now. You know your problem? You mistake standing still for loyalty. You're over at Mom and Dad's every week doing what exactly? Groceries, rides, sitting around their kitchen? The rest of us went out and actually built something. He raised the glass at the whole shining room. This is what building a life looks like.
It's a beautiful room, Dean. Nobody's arguing that.
No, nobody is. He liked that. He thought he'd won it. You should let me set you up, you know. I mean it. Put you in a shirt with a collar, get you out of that shoebox, teach you which end of a dollar is which. Because let's be honest, that was never your strong suit.
My place is quiet. It's the one room all week where nobody's performing.
There he is again. He laughed, but it came a beat late. Everybody in this family thinks you're so quiet. I'm the only one who knows you sit there certain you're the smartest man in the room.
I don't think that.
No.
I think I'm the one who shows up. That's a different thing. Something moved behind his face when I said it. Not anger. closer to arithmetic, the look of a man rechecking a number he'd been sure of. Before he could decide what to do with it, Danielle came by with a plate balanced along her forearm and set it down in front of our parents.
There's more where that came from. And don't let him put the three of you to work tonight.
Little late for that.
I know.
She said it lightly enough, but she didn't smile when she said it, and she was already moving back toward the kitchen before I could decide what the two words had weighed. Dean watched her go, then stood and clapped me once on the knee.
Keep it up. Stick around tonight, though. I've got something planned that's going to put all of this in perspective for you.
You've been doing a lot of planning lately.
I'm always planning. That's the difference between us, remember?
I remember. He winked, drained the glass, and went back to being the host before I could ask what he meant, which was the entire reason he'd said it. I watched him move off across his own floor, shaking hands, gathering up more of the room's admiration, and I sat where he'd told me to sit, between the two people who had raised us both, and I did not feel small. That was the one thing he had never once managed to arrange. He could hand me the apron and a driveway full of somebody else's cars and a whole room already tuned to laugh on cue, and somewhere under all of it I stayed exactly the size I was. The party found its rhythm after that. Plates went around, then coffee, and near the end of it the caterers cleared a space at the center table and set down a sheet cake the size of a door, a long knife laid across the board beside it. Dean waited until the cake was in place before he moved, the way he waited for everything, until the room was arranged exactly the way he wanted to be seen standing in the middle of it. Around 9, he climbed 2 steps up his own staircase, so the room had to tilt its head up to find him, and he clapped his hands twice, high over his head, until the music dropped out from under the conversation.
Everybody, no, keep drinking, don't let me stop you.
He waited for the quiet the way you wait for a check to clear.
Now, don't anybody panic. I'm not going to give the big speech yet. That one keeps till after the cake.
That got a laugh. He let it run, then lifted one finger for a little more.
So, save room for cake. And don't anybody sneak out early on me, because later on I've got a special thank you planned for somebody in this family who has really truly earned what's coming to him.
He found me over the top of 40 heads when he said it. He didn't have to point. Everyone followed his eyes down to the couch by the window, to the reliable one wedged between the two old people, and a warm little current of anticipation went around the room, because they thought they already knew what kind of thank you a man like Dean hands a brother like me, and they were looking forward to it. I held his eye and let him have that too. My mother's hand was resting in mine. My father had stopped watching his older son on the stairs and started watching me, with a look I couldn't read and didn't reach for. The room already had its script, and I had brought a guest of my own. Dean's little speech from the stairs came apart into the ordinary noise of a party going back to itself. Glasses, the caterer's tray, 40 people picking up the work of admiring the house. He'd told everyone to keep drinking and not to let him stop them, and I meant to take him at his word. He had just handed me a loose stretch of evening before whatever he'd promised the room, and I had a use for it. I'd brought a guest of my own, and it was time she stopped being decorative. I am the younger son. What that has meant, for as long as this family has bothered to keep score, is that I am the one who shows up. Every Tuesday I drive my mother across town to the clinic and sit in the plastic chairs and drive her home. I hung a new storm door on their house in October because the old one had dropped its corner, and my father would rather it fell off the frame entirely than let a stranger charge him to fix it. When the water heater went in February, I was the one on my back in the crawl space with a flashlight clamped in my teeth. None of that has a photograph. The only pictures of me that ever traveled were the ones my brother wanted traveling. There is a thread in the family chat, hundreds of messages deep, where I am the houseboy and the help, where a picture of me carrying a folding table earns more replies than anyone's actual news. Dean built that thread the way another man builds a fence, a weekend at a time, one more board nailed on whenever the mood took him. 3 years running now. I quit reading it back to myself a long while ago. I never once quit saving it. The saving isn't mine. I got it from my grandfather, who kept every voicemail anyone ever left him until the little machine on his counter filled up, and then went out and bought a bigger one. Sunday afternoons, he'd sit at his kitchen table with a cup going cold and play them back, one after another. A wrong number from a Tuesday, my grandmother telling him to pick up eggs. A man from the bank he had already outlived. He never explained it, and I never thought to ask. I only know I do the version of it my time allows. Where he had a machine, I have a folder. In it, going back 3 years and change, is everything my brother has ever posted about me under his own name, downloaded the day it went up, each one wearing its date like a tag stitched into a coat. His texts are in there, too. The ones he sent straight to me when the mood was on him and he wanted an audience of exactly one. There's a message from last spring I could recite with my eyes shut.
Nobody questions the broke brother. That's the whole point of you, little brother. You're the one nobody ever thinks to check.
He sent that at 11 at night, pleased with himself, the way you'd forward a friend a good line the second it landed. There's another from a week later, when I still hadn't answered.
Relax, it's love. If I stopped ribbing you, how would you even know you were still in the family?
I didn't answer those either. I filed them by date with the rest, the way my grandfather filed his voicemails and let them sit. I could not have told you that night what I ever expected to do with any of it. There was one thing in the last month that fit worse than anything Dean had ever done, and it had nothing to do with him. My father, a man who has paid cash for every car he ever drove and would sooner skip dinner than owe a stranger $1, leaned across his own kitchen table and asked me, quiet, whether I could spot him 40 for gas until the end of the week. He said it light. He waved it off before my hand reached my wallet, told me to forget it, said he'd only just remembered he'd left his other card at the house. I gave him the 40 anyway. He took it and folded it small, and I drove home unable to set the moment down, turning it over the way you turn a coin that came back wrong out of a machine. Not because $40 is a sum, but because my father asking me for it at all was a thing the world was not supposed to do. It meant nothing I could put words to, and it still didn't, standing in his older son's month-old living room with a glass of that son's wine going warm in my hand. One wrong note and no song around it. But it was enough that when the invitation to this housewarming came, my name written out in Danielle's careful hand, I did a thing I had never once done for a family party in my life. I asked somebody to come with me. She was over by the far window, held a little apart from the noise on purpose, gray dress and flat shoes, a club soda in her hand she had no intention of finishing. Ruth had been a friend of my mother's since before I was born, and somewhere along the way, she'd become the one my parents phoned whenever a paper needed a signature they could stand behind. To this room, she was some pleasant older woman a guest's parents happened to know. I'd asked her to come as a friend of the family, and over the phone she had held the line a beat too long before she said she'd be glad to. I crossed to her. She watched me come the whole way across the floor, which is more than anyone else in that house had managed all night.
There he is, the busiest man at a party where he isn't allowed to lift a finger.
I'm allowed. I'm encouraged. My brother's very generous with the chores.
What hope do you have against me? So I gathered. I've stood here the better part of an hour watching 40 people thank a man for a house, and watching exactly one man in the room keep his eye on the door instead. She tipped her glass a half-inch toward the couch. And on those two, you haven't once looked away from your mother's chair since I walked in.
You're the one who taught me to sit where I can see the exits.
What hope do you have against me? I taught your mother that. You just listened at the table the way you always did, when everyone assumed you weren't. She let it settle. Your mother's proud tonight. She keeps looking at that boy on the stairs like he raised the ceiling himself. And every few minutes she looks over you, and it is a wholly different look, and I don't think she has the first idea she's doing it.
She's had a lot of practice not knowing she's doing it.
What hope do you have against me? So has your father. I watched him let you take his arm down off the curb tonight and not fight you on it. Near 40 years I've known that man, and in all of them he has never once let another living soul carry him anywhere.
His knees settled the argument, not me.
What hope do you have 10 years? She said it plainly, a friend counting something quietly out loud. Something else settled it. Then she turned back to me lighter. And how are you? Not the answer this family hands out on your behalf, you.
I'm fine, Ruth. I sleep enough. I've got a chair I like and a door that locks from the inside.
What hope do you have against me? That is the most words I've had out of you since you were 9 and lost the tooth. You didn't cry, and you carried it to the dentist in your fist the whole way, like it was worth something to somebody.
Somebody had to carry it.
What hope do you have against me? It is a beautiful house, and your brother is giving quite a performance in it. 40 people came to watch a man be grateful, and not one has noticed he hasn't stopped counting the rooms since the door opened. She looked at me straight on. You didn't ask me to a party twice, sweetheart. You have never in your life asked me to anything. So before I finish admiring his countertops, what am I doing here?
I didn't have the answer she was reaching for because I didn't have it yet myself. What I had was a wrong note, a folder, and a father who'd asked me for $40. So I gave her the only true thing I could stand all the way behind. I set my glass down on the side table beside her, and next to it, face up, screen gone dark, I set my phone. It had been recording since I came through the front door. I turned it so the room ran into the mic and my back covered the light. I don't know yet. I wanted somebody in the room who knows those two better than they let anyone know them and who won't clap when the man on the stairs tells them to. Stay near Mom and Dad. Watch the drinks, not me.
Watch the drinks.
It might not be the drinks at all. Something's gone quiet wrong around those two lately, and I can't lay a finger on the shape of it. If tonight turns strange, I want somebody standing near them who was already looking. Probably it's nothing.
What hope do you have against me, probably? She did not say it like a woman who believed the word, and she held my eye a moment past easy, and whatever she was adding up behind it, she kept the sum to herself, which was one of several reasons my parents had trusted her as long as they had. All right, I'll watch the drinks. What hope do you have against me? He's going to make a speech about you before Reddy know that.
He announced it from the stairs. He's calling it a thank you.
What hope do you have against me? A thank you. She turned the words over like they carried a smell. In front of 40 people he has spent the whole night telling what you are. You could lift those 2 coats off the rack this minute and walk your parents out to the car and leave him to give his speech to an empty chair.
And hand him the empty chair to point at.
So you're staying.
I'm staying. An empty chair would say everything he's spent 3 years teaching this room to believe about me. I'd sooner sit in it than give it to him.
What hope do you have to read? She stood and smoothed the gray dress down. There used to be a boy who told me everything.
He grew up in this family. It cured him of the habit. That earned the corner of her mouth. She moved off toward the couch without being told twice, and inside a minute she had folded herself onto the cushion at my mother's side, as though the seat had always had her name on it, saying something low that opened my mother's whole face. My father shifted to let a stranger's oldest friend in close. For the first time all evening, the 3 of them on that couch stopped looking like people I had to guard alone and started looking like people who had somebody stationed over them for once. It had cost me a single phone call and 1 lie small enough to fold into a coat pocket. None of it added up to a plan, and I didn't pretend to myself that it did. A folder 3 years deep, a father who'd tucked $40 into his shirt pocket, a friend of my mother's now parked where she could account for every glass in the house. That is not a strategy. It is a hand still lying face down on the table. But for the first time across a long run of these evenings, my brother was not the only person in his own room who had brought something to it, and he was the one man there who had no idea of that yet. I stood in the middle of his floor, no longer waiting for the night to be done to me. Across the room, my brother was finished letting the party breathe. I watched him lift his glass off the mantel, cross to the wide television that took up half the far wall, the one thing in the whole month-old house already mounted and wired, and pick up a remote he'd left waiting on the console for exactly this. In the kitchen doorway, Danielle had gone still. He clapped his hands twice, the host taking his floor back.
Okay, everybody, eyes up here a second. I promised you a proper thank you, and I'm a man who keeps his word. Somebody get those lights for me.
The overheads came down. The screen woke up blue, then filled, and the first thing 40 people saw hanging 8 feet tall on my brother's wall was a photograph of me. Younger, red-faced with concentration, carrying a big cake in flat across both arms, and set beneath it in a font he had gone and chosen on purpose, the words, "My brother, the houseboy." The room made the sound a room makes when it has just been handed permission to laugh at a man and hasn't yet worked out how far the permission runs. I did not step toward the door, and I did not step toward the screen. I looked down, once, at the dark rectangle of my phone lying face up on the side table beside a glass of warming wine, and I checked that the light in the corner was still on and the mic still open, still taking down every sound in the room. Then I raised my eyes back to 8 feet of my own face, and I let my brother walk the rest of the way into the evening he was so certain belonged to him. I crossed back through the half-dark and took my seat on the couch between my mother and my father, and I stayed in it. My brother let the first picture hang until the laughing found its legs, and only then did he work his thumb on the remote. He was in no hurry. He had assembled the thing slide by slide, the way he assembled everything that had my name on it, and now he meant to spend it in front of a room that had dressed for the spending. He stood beside the wide screen with the glass in one hand and the remote in the other, blue light down the near side of his face, and he waited until 40 people were all looking where he was pointing before he opened his mouth.
That one's the original, folks. Right there, Dad's 69th. He raised the glass toward 8 feet of my own red face. My brother drove the cake clear across town with it riding shotgun like a date, then ricocheted it in flat on both arms, and God bless whoever had the presence of mind to get the picture. Look at the concentration on the man. That is somebody doing what he honestly believes is the most important job at the party.
The room laughed on cue. Over by the blue glow of the wine fridge, a man went first. The way people go first at a thing they've been told in advance is funny before they've quite finished deciding for themselves, and once one of them had committed, the rest of them had their cover. Dean rode the sound down to the bottom and clicked forward.
Oh, it's a whole collection, don't you worry. Here, Mom's block party, the folding tables, that's 40 pounds of aluminum and one very dedicated man of the people. And this next one is mine. This one's my personal favorite. He clicked again, under my kitchen sink. The day we moved in, nobody asked him. I turned around to top off a drink and there are 2 legs sticking out of my own cabinet. The man physically cannot walk past a shut-off valve. It is a medical condition.
The trap was weeping at the slip nut, I said, pitched flat and just loud enough to reach him. Another week of that and you'd have had the particle board swelling under your new floor.
You hear this? You hear him? He spread his arms wide to the room, delighted, handed a gift. He crawls under a thing you didn't know was broken, fixes it without asking, and then bills you in guilt for the next 30 years. That is the whole service, folks. That's the package.
He waited for that one to land, and then he clicked ahead to another, and this one was darker, shot from a doorway, a pair of legs and boots sticking out from under something low in a bad light.
February. The water heater went at Mom and Dad's. And that is my brother down in the crawl space at 11 o'clock at night, boots sticking out into the light, because heaven forbid a real tradesman set foot in the house and charge a fair man an honest rate. 2 hours he was under there. Came up looking like a chimney sweep, and he wouldn't take a dime for it, wouldn't stay for a plate. Somebody in this family always has the good sense to get it on camera. That's how you end up with a collection like this one.
Each picture came up wearing words underneath it, set in the same font he'd hunted down for the first one. The houseboy, then the help, then the family fixture. And each caption a shade heavier than the one before. He had sat somewhere, on some empty evening with nothing better in front of him, and typed all of them out. I could picture him doing that more plainly than I could picture anything actually happening in the room. My mother sat a few feet off with her hands folded in her lap and a small fixed shape on her face that was trying to pass for a smile. Ruth was at her shoulder and did not attempt one. On the side table, my phone lay face up where I'd set it down.
And that is the thing I love about the guy. I mean it now. He'd quit clicking. He had the whole room in his hand, and he wanted the serious part while he had it, the way he always saved the serious part for the moment he was surest of his feet. Some of us went out into the world and built something, this house. A name people in this town actually know. A life you can put in a photograph and not have to explain to anybody. And some of us decided the entire point of a life was to stand very still in other people's kitchens and call the standing loyalty. And you know what? I say let him have it. Every family ought to keep one on staff.
They laughed at that. And it was a fuller, rounder sound than the snickering before it, because he'd finally handed them something they could agree with, instead of just something they could sneak. I had watched my brother reach for that word, built, my whole life, and I understood by now that it wasn't a boast so much as a thing he needed a room full of people to nod along to. He spent the way he talked, out where the room could count it. The second car in the driveway before the first one was paid off, the watch he had taken to turning on his wrist until somebody asked after it. The way he reached for the check at every family dinner now and held it up an extra beat so the whole table clocked whose hand it sat in. He built his case in small, loud pieces like that, and he built it that hard only because some part of him had started to wonder whether the room was still sure. A man who takes on far more house than one man could fill has to be the son who made something real, or he is just a man alone in a lot of expensive square footage with all the lights on. A month back, he had walked me through these same rooms before there was a stick of furniture in any of them, his footsteps going loud and hollow off the bare floor. And he'd stopped me in the middle of the empty living room and thrown both arms wide the exact way he was throwing them now.
This is what it looks like when a man in this family finally bets on himself, instead of hanging around his whole life waiting to be useful to somebody.
He had meant it as the entire distance between us. Keeping me small was never a hobby of his. It was the frame the whole picture of him hung inside. If I was the brother who only ever showed up, then he got to be the brother who had gone and done all the rest of it, and the sum came out the way he needed it to. He didn't hate me. He needed me at exactly this size, had needed it a long time, and tonight he'd gone and built a wall to hang the need on and asked 40 people over to admire it. There was a version of this evening where I sat still through the whole of it. I had sat still through a great many of them, in a great many rooms, and I knew the shape of that version the way you know the walk to your own door in the dark. It cost nothing, and it changed nothing, and it let the picture keep hanging. But there was a phone lying face up on the side table with its mouth open to the room, and there was a woman on the couch beside my mother who had not laughed once. An answer said out loud, where those two could catch it, was a different thing from one I swallowed. I didn't need the room to walk over to my side. I only needed it said once, with the lights on and the thing on the table running. So I stopped letting him. I didn't stand, and I didn't raise my voice. I only pitched it to carry the way his had been carrying all night, out past the couch and into the middle of his floor. You keep saying you. I looked up at the screen, at the caption still burning under my own face. My brother, the houseboy. My brother, the help. You wrote every one of those, Dean. You picked that font. You sat there on a Tuesday and chose it. I let it stand a second. That is not a picture of me hanging on your wall. That's a picture of what you do with your evenings. You wrote it. Go ahead and put your name on it. There was a laugh then, and it was a different animal from the ones that came before. Shorter, startled out of people, and it came up from the wrong corner of the room for him. A woman by the island pressed a hand flat over her mouth. Dean turned his head toward the sound, quick, the way he always turned toward a laugh, and I watched him find that this one had come down on my side of the floor and not his.
See? No. He was talking over the top of it before it could get any more air under it. This right here is the move. He plays the wounded party. He has done it since we were children. It's a joke, folks. It is a joke, and every single person in this room understands that, but the one man the joke happens to be fond of.
I'm not the one who spent a week building the joke a slideshow.
It's called a tribute. Most people, you make them a tribute. They manage a thank you.
Thank you for the font.
Lighten up. The smile stayed nailed on, but it had gone tight at one corner. You're going to stand in my house and give all these good people the wrong idea about a perfectly nice night. He came back to the room, opening both hands, gathering them in again the way he always could. He gets like this. Once a year he decides the whole world's been unfair to him and everybody else has to hold still for it. You should see the holiday.
And then he did the thing he always did when a moment slipped its leash. He thumbed the remote back to the first one, the original. My own red face 8 feet tall again, the houseboy caption burning white beneath it. So the room had a picture of mine to look at while he worked. Then he lifted his phone. He brought it up to that practiced little downward angle and set the lens on my face, on the one man in his house who wasn't laughing, and he narrated the shot to the room while he framed it.
Look at this face. The help, everybody. Caught live, not amused, ladies and gentlemen. Straight to the family. Oh, they are going to love this one.
The screen behind him still held my face from 3 years back, and now the phone in his fist held it from 3 seconds back, the same man twice over, and 40 people looked from the wall to the bright little rectangle in his hand and remembered whose evening this was and whose it wasn't. The room came back to him. It always came back to him. He had spent a very long time teaching it the way home, and a room learns a road like that. Underneath all of it, my own phone lay face up on the side table where I'd left it, and my brother set his glass on the mantel. I let it go. There is no catching a laugh once he has called it home, and reaching after it only hands him the next one. I kept my seat between the two people I had come there for and let my brother take his room back, because the room had never once been the thing I brought with me. My mother had given up on the shape that had been trying to pass for a smile. She was looking down at the backs of her own folded hands, the way she did in the clinic waiting rooms on Tuesdays, as though there were something written across them she could read and reread to keep herself from lifting her eyes back up to the wall. Beside her, Ruth had not once turned to look at the screen. She had spent the whole of my brother's performance watching my brother instead, steady and unhurried, the way you watch a man who is enjoying the sound of his own evening a great deal more than the evening has done anything to earn. Neither of the two women had made a sound in some time, and my brother, up in the noise he had built for himself, had not noticed that either. My father had stopped watching the screen. He was watching the two of us the way a man watches a road he isn't sure he took the right turn off of, and he said nothing about any of it because saying nothing at the sight of his two sons was the oldest habit he owned. Then he came back across the floor toward the couch, unhurried, still wearing the face he wore for the room, and he crouched down beside me so that the guests saw nothing but a brother leaning in warm and close to a brother. He put his mouth near my ear and dropped his voice under the noise of the party.
Careful, little brother. After everything Mom and Dad have done for you, all the years of it, you really do not want to be the one who stands up and embarrasses me at my own house.
I didn't answer the whisper. There's no answering a thing said that close to your ear in a crowded room. The closeness is the whole of the message, and a reply only tells 40 people that a secret has changed hands. So I let it lie against the side of my face and watched him rise back to his full height, unhurried, the host again. And I understood that the crouch had been the last private thing he meant to do all night. Whatever came after it, he was going to spend out loud.
Anyway, he said it to the room, dusting his knees off like a man getting up from a good deed. Don't mind us folks, brothers. You spend a whole lifetime teaching a guy how to take a joke, and some nights it just doesn't take. Drink up, there's plenty. Cake's coming, I promise. And I promise nobody's leaving here sober enough to drive, which is exactly why the good Lord invented the man with the...
A few of them laughed, and it was a softer laugh than the ones before it, the kind a room gives a host who's being gracious about a guest who has embarrassed himself. That was the sound I should have caught faster than I did, because it was the wrong laugh for anything that had actually happened in front of them. Nobody in that house had watched me do one embarrassing thing. I'd said 4 flat sentences from a couch and handed a 20 to a kid who parked cars. But they laughed as though they'd watched me knock a lamp off a table, and a room does not arrive at a verdict that tidy on its own. Somebody hands it to them early, before the man it's about has even come through the door. I knew where this one had been handed to them because I'd read it that afternoon myself. I'm on the same family chat as every person standing in that house, the same thread that runs 3 years deep. And a few hours before the first car came up his brand-new driveway, my brother had gone out ahead of his own party and laid the ground.
Heads up before tonight, everybody. If my little brother gets you in a corner, do yourself a favor and just smile and drift. He's been circling the family about money for a couple years now, and he gets a little strange at these things. Love the guy to death. But somebody's always got to keep half an eye on him. And if he starts in on me tonight, just remember he's been bitter about this house since the day I signed the papers on it. Jealousy's a hard thing to watch up close. Be kind to him.
He'd typed circling the family about money on the afternoon of a party he was throwing in a house I would come to understand a great deal about before the night was through. And 40 people had read it over lunch and driven over already knowing the part they'd been cast to watch me play. I keep everything my brother writes down. I have since the beginning. So I'd sat that afternoon and read the little pre-game speech he'd sent the room, and I'd saved it with the rest, and I'd come anyway, because staying home would only have proved the sentence right. Over by the far window, Tyler had it open on his phone. Tyler is a cousin, 30, and for 3 years running, he had been the loudest laugher in a thread built for laughing at me. He shared the old clips more than anyone did, always first, always with something of his own stacked on top. He had one going now, thumbing it up to the little knot of people by the wine fridge, turning the screen so they could all see.
No, but you've got to see the original. This is the one, the cake one. Here, look at his little face, dead serious. Every single year I think he's peaked, and every single year the man finds a way to outdo himself, I swear to God.
Dean let that breathe, and then he lifted a hand and quieted his own joke, the way he always kept a sincere face folded in his back pocket for exactly the moment the laughing needed somewhere respectable to land.
No, but in all seriousness now. In all seriousness, he waited for the room. After everything Mom and Dad have done for that man, and I mean everything, for years, you'd think the one night he could hand them clean is the night his brother finally gets a house of his own. One night. That's the whole ask. Instead, we get the speech. At my housewarming, in front of my friends. He shook his head, warm wounded, forgiving it all in advance. I'm not even mad. I'm just saying. There's a way to be a brother, and then there's whatever this is.
And here is where I did the thing I have always done. I held still. I kept the patient half-smile I'd worn into 100 rooms exactly like this one, and I said nothing, because saying nothing had always been the cheapest thing in the house, and it had never once cost me anything I could put a hand on. I let Tyler keep his clip. I let the soft laugh roll past me and find its level. I sat there wearing the face of a man who is above the whole business, and I waited for it to move over me and be gone, the way I'd waited a long line of them out before it. It did not move over me. It landed. I watched it land in real time, and I watched exactly where.
See, look at him. He's not even going to deny it. He never does. You notice that? He just sits there and takes it. That's how you know it's true.
The room hardened around that sentence. Not denying is a powerful gift to hand a crowd that has already been told what to believe, because it lets them feel they watched the proof walk in the door instead of being handed it that afternoon over lunch. A woman near the island nodded to herself. Somebody behind the couch said a low thing I didn't catch, and somebody else agreed with it under their breath. And 2 feet to my right, my mother, who had been holding a small plate of nothing on her knees for the better part of an hour, looked down at it. She looked down at 2 crackers on a paper plate as if they'd put a question to her that she needed a long time to answer, and she kept her eyes down there, and I understood all at once that she'd dropped them so she would not have to watch a room full of people decide the thing about her son while her son sat beside her and let them. Her thumb was moving on the rim of the plate, small and steady, the way it moved on the strap of her handbag in the clinic chairs on Tuesdays, when a name got called that wasn't ours yet. She had come to her older boy's new house in the good coat she saved for church and weddings. Proud of him, proud of the ceilings and the countertops, and somewhere in the last 20 minutes the night had quietly asked her to be ashamed of the other one instead, and she was too gentle a person to refuse it out loud. Beside her, Ruth wasn't looking at the plate. Ruth was looking at me, the one person in that house waiting to see what I would actually do. That was the cost, and it was the first time I'd ever been made to hold it in my hand and feel the weight of it. I'd have told you, an hour earlier, that my stillness was a thing I spent on nobody but myself. A private economy. Mine to run however I liked, and the room could think whatever the room wanted. I had the accounting wrong. The silence wasn't landing on me at all. It was landing on the woman with the plate. My brother had built a machine that turned my patience into her shame, and the more of it I fed the thing, the smoother it ran. And up at the front of his own room, still holding the floor, Dean was watching me take it, and his smile came a half-inch wider on his face, because a man who has spent years studying what you'll swallow can read the swallow clean across a room, and mine was the fuel his whole night was running on. So I stopped feeding it. I stood up. Not fast and not loud. I've never had the volume for loud, and I wasn't about to go borrow some. I stood the way you stand up at your own kitchen table, and I didn't turn to face the room, because turning to the room to defend myself was the one move my brother had spent 3 years making certain would come out sounding like a confession. I turned to him instead. "Say it to the room, Dean." I pitched it flat out past the couch to carry the way his had been carrying all night. Not to me, to all of them. Who drives Mom across town every Tuesday and sits in the plastic chairs and drives her home? Who's flat on his back under their house at 11 at night when the water heater lets go? And while you've got everybody here, who's been handling their money?
Oh, here we go, he laughed, but he threw it wide to the room first, checking the floor was still under him. Ladies and gentlemen, the annual grievance. Right on time, every year. You could set a watch by it.
It's not a grievance. It's a question. And it's an easy one. I didn't take a step toward him. I let the quiet do the walking for me. You've spent all night telling these people what you built. So tell them the rest of it. Tell them what you handle.
He handles plenty, man, everybody knows.
I asked Dean. I didn't raise it. I just held it there, level, and let it sit on him. Go on. Who takes care of Mom and Dad?
You know what this is? This is a sickness. A man opens up his home, he feeds you, he pours you a drink.
It's not a hard question, Dean. 4 words and you're done. Who takes care of them? And there it was. The trap folded up inside a compliment. Set down in the one spot a man like my brother has never once in his life been able to leave alone. He could not wave the question off without looking like the son who'd never lifted a finger. Not here. Not standing in front of 40 people he had personally invited over to admire the precise size of the son he was. So he did the only thing the room had left him any room to do. He squared his shoulders, and he reached out and took the whole of the credit with both hands.
All right, yeah. I take care of Mom and Dad, me, the bills, the doctors, the house payment, the accounts, the paperwork. All of it, that's me. That's been me for a good long while now, and not one person in this room has ever heard me stand up and ask for a thank you for it. He opened both hands to the guests, gathering them back where he wanted them. That's the whole difference between us, little brother, right there. I don't drive Mom to a clinic once a week and hang a medal on myself for it. I carry the entire thing. Every dollar of it comes across my desk, and I handle it myself, all of it, so that the two of them never have to sit up at night with a calculator and a shoebox of bills again as long as they live. That's what a real son looks like. You want to stand here in my house in front of my friends and audit me for it? Go ahead. Take your time. I'll wait.
The room made a warm, low sound at that. The particular sound of people watching a good son set a sour one back down in his place. And my brother drank the whole of it. He believed he'd won the exchange, and by every measure the room was equipped to take, he had. But I hadn't come up off that couch to win the room. I'd come up to get one sentence said out loud, in a house wall-to-wall with witnesses, with a phone lying face up on the side table, quietly taking down every word of it. The bills, the accounts, the paperwork, all of it. That's me. He'd handed it to me, gift-wrapped as a boast, and somewhere down under my ribs, in the exact place my father's voice had lodged itself a month back. Leaning across his own kitchen table, asking me quiet if I could spot him 40 for gas until Friday, and then waving it off like it was nothing, my brother's boast did not land like a boast at all. I sat back down between my mother and my father. I didn't say another word to him. I had the one I'd stood up for. They had the whole room before I said a word. What none of them knew was who I'd brought, and what my brother would say on his own patio before the night was over. The room did what rooms do once they've settled a thing about a man. It let go of it. Somebody found the music and put it back up, the crowd by the wine fridge came apart into smaller crowds, and my brother went from prosecuting his own party to hosting it again, moving glass to glass with the bottle, laughing wide at 40 people who had all just agreed about me and were relieved to have it filed. The verdict is the loud part. The after is quiet, and the quiet was worse, because the quiet was the whole room agreeing among themselves that it had been fair. My mother lifted her eyes off the plate at last. Nobody was studying her now to see which son she was meant to be ashamed of, and that let her go back to being nobody's mother in particular for a minute, which was about as much mercy as that house kept in stock. I stayed in my seat between the two of them. A man who stands up too fast after a thing like that only tells the room the thing had landed. So the hand that came down on my shoulder caught me wrong-footed, because it came from the side I wasn't guarding, not my mother's side, not my father's. It came from the woman I had driven over there myself, walked in under the plain word guest, and seated among my parents with one low instruction to watch the drinks and not to watch me. Her voice arrived under the music, level and close to my ear, and she used my name. My actual name. The one nobody under that roof had bothered to pick up all night.
Come hope do you have against me, not toward anybody, just us and the sink.
I rose the unhurried way, the way you rise to go refill a glass so the room reads nothing into it, and I followed her down the short hall into the kitchen. The caterers' trays sat along the counter under their foil, and the party came through the doorway behind us, flattened and far off. She set her back against the counter and turned and looked at me the way she'd been looking at my brother the whole evening. Steady, unhurried. A person taking the full measure of a thing before she'd spend a single word on it.
What hope do you have against me? I've been your parents' lawyer 11 years, longer than your brother's been performing that opinion he keeps of you. She didn't smile. I wrote their wills, their power of attorney, the little bit of property they hold. I know what belongs in their accounts to within a few $100 because I sat at their table and helped put most of it there, and it isn't there. Hasn't been for a while. I think you already know that.
I did know it. I had refused myself the word for it, but I knew it. And the knowing had a single address. A month back, at my parents' own kitchen table, my father leaning across it to ask me, low, whether I could spot him 40 for gas until Friday, and then flapping the whole question away the instant it cleared his teeth. A man ambushed by the sound of his own voice asking. My father has not borrowed $1 in his life. He'd walk to work in the rain before he'd hold a hand out to either of his sons. And he had. I'd been carrying the wrongness of that around for a month with nowhere to set it down. And not 20 minutes earlier, out in that room, in front of all 40 of them, my brother had thrown both arms wide and gathered up every dollar of it as his own. The bills, the accounts, the paperwork, all of it, that's me. He'd set it to sound like the good son. The room had made the warm noise it makes for good sons, and I had sat there holding the other half of a sentence he didn't know had two. You heard him, I said.
What hope do you have against me? Dog comes across his desk and he handles it himself. His words. She let it stand. He thinks he made a boast. He doesn't know he made it in front of the one person here who was going to hold him to it.
She hadn't raised her voice once. That was the thing pulling the floor out from under me more than any of the words. The flatness of her, describing what she had already worked out. She'd noticed it months ago, she said, and she said it the way you'd report the weather. The statements she'd asked for to keep their file current had come from my brother's hand instead of the bank, and come late.
What hope do one question to him? One transfer I didn't recognize. He had the answer ready before I'd finished asking. Nobody keeps an answer that's smooth unless he's used it before.
You can't prove any of it.
What hope do you have against me? Not yet. But I have known the shape of your parents' money a long time. It changed, and only one set of hands was ever near it.
It fit the month I'd been carrying. It fit my father's $40 and the way he'd flinched from his own asking. The man quietly draining his parents' accounts had to be seen, loudly and often, as the one keeping them full. And for a year I'd watched my brother reach for every check at every family dinner and hold it up that extra beat, and I'd read it as him being him. I had it backwards.
What hope do you have against me? So here is what I need you to hear, because you've spent this whole night in the wrong fight. Her voice stayed down and lost nothing for it. You've been trying to make a room believe you're not the joke. You can't win that in a night, and it was never the fight that counted. An apology, a share, a confession to the family. None of that is the target. What hope do you have against me? Under a hand that signed their names, that is no family quarrel. That is forgery. And done to two people their age who gave a son the keys because he was their son. The law keeps a harder name for it.
You're telling me he stole from them.
What hope do you have against me? I'm telling you the money that should be there isn't, and there's exactly one man in this family with both hands on the accounts. She held my eyes without any hurry in it at all. In plain English, this isn't a family fight anymore. It's a crime with a case number.
And there was the swing of it. The whole floor of the night tilting. For 3 years, I'd been fighting to be believed by a roomful of people who'd decided in advance not to. Set beside the thing she had just named, that fight shrank to nothing in my hands. Being believed by that room was a small private ache. Two old people robbed under a signature that wasn't theirs was a thing you could carry into a building and set on a desk. The one had been about me. The other was not about me at all, and that was what finally got me up onto my feet. And she believed me. The strangest floor of the night to find under my boots. For 3 years, the word for me in this family had been settled, and it was not a word you brought evidence to. Ruth ran on records instead of moods, and she'd come down on my side before I showed her a single file. Nobody under that roof would have believed me holding the proof in both hands on the table. She believed me with it still in my pocket. I had called her 4 days earlier. I hadn't let the want take a shape yet, so I'd said the smallest true version of it, that my folks were getting on, that my brother handled things now, that I'd rest easier if a friend of theirs, someone who'd known those two longer than either of their sons had, happened to be in the room. Come as a guest, I told her. Sit with my parents. Have a plate. She had come and eaten nothing, and watched my brother all night with that flat, patient attention, and standing in the kitchen now, I understood she'd heard the real sentence under the small one 4 days back and driven over ready for the rest of it. So I did the thing I have done my whole life without anyone once telling me it was worth doing. I reached for the record. I took out my phone and thumbed open a folder I had never in 3 years shown to another living person, and I turned the screen around to face her. 3 years, I said. Every post he ever made with my face in it. The cake, the block party tables, me flat on my back under his kitchen sink. Each one dated the day he put it up, the caption he wrote sitting right underneath. I didn't save them to use on him. I don't honestly know why I saved them. I've just always kept things. I dragged it down for her, past the images, into the gray blocks underneath. And these are texts, from him, to me. The ones he sent on the nights nobody was in the room to watch him send anything. I stopped on the one I wanted under her eyes first, and I let her read it herself instead of reading it for her.
Nobody questions the broke brother. That's the whole point of you, little brother. You're the one nobody ever thinks to check.
She read it twice. I watched her read it twice. There were dozens more under that one, a low, steady drip of the same voice across 3 years, some cruel outright, some worse for being casual. I had never answered one of them. I had only kept them, filed and dated the way I keep everything, and answering would only have told him there was a man in there worth reaching.
What hope do you have against me? These are dated. She wasn't looking at me any more. Careful, the last of the party emptied out of her face. Everyone. The posts and the text both. He put a date on his own mouth for 3 years running and mailed you the stamps.
He never once thought I was somebody a thing might need hiding from.
No. She looked up and handed the phone back into my hand. Send me the whole of it tonight, the posts, the texts, the dates, exactly the way they sit. Don't clean it up, don't reorder it, don't touch it. I want it the way you kept it, not the way you'd like it to look.
Then let's give it a case number. I watched the sentence land on her, and I watched her take it seriously, which was its own strange event, because I had spent 3 years as a man whose sentences a room let slide past on their way to something better. She did not let this one slide. She gave a single, small nod, the clean nod of somebody agreeing to pick a heavy thing up and carry it the whole rest of the way, and for the first time since I'd come through the door under an apron I was never going to wear, the evening stopped being a thing that was happening to me and became a thing I had a hand on.
What hope do you have against me? I need to make one call, and not from this kitchen. Somewhere with a door that shuts. She was already drawing her own phone out of her bag. There's a line that takes exactly this kind of call, and it answers after hours. The minute I make it, this stops being something you and I know by a sink and turns into something with a file open underneath it. That door doesn't shut again once it's open. I don't think you want it shut.
I don't.
What hope do you have against me? Then give me the one thing I need while I'm on it. Only this. She tipped her head toward the doorway, toward the noise, toward my brother somewhere in the middle of it. Watch him. The second a man like that feels the floor move under his money, and he'll feel it before he can name it. Always do. The first thing he reaches to do is tidy up. Watch what he picks up. Watch who he takes aside. Don't get in his way. Only see it.
I stepped back to the mouth of the hall, to the spot where I could see the length of the main room, and it was very nearly as though he had heard her clean through 2 walls. My brother had already put the bottle down. He was pouring for nobody now. He had one hand laid flat on the shoulder of one of the younger cousins, a soft, biddable one whose name I'd have had to reach for, the kind who is forever half a step behind whoever he has decided is worth standing near. And he was steering him, easy, unhurried, wearing the open face of a host walking a guest somewhere the music couldn't reach, out across the floor toward the far glass doors and the dark patio waiting behind them. The floor had moved. He had felt it before he could put a name to it, exactly the way she'd said he would. Behind me, down the hall, I could hear my parents' lawyer already dialing. I stood in the doorway with a folder open on my phone and my father's $40 still sitting somewhere under my ribs, and I watched my brother go hunting for a quiet place to put his hands. I did not get in his way. She had told me not to. I only saw it. I did not follow him toward the patio. I stayed at the mouth of the hall where Ruth had left me, and I watched my brother do the exact thing she had named before it happened. He had the young cousin half steered toward the far glass doors, one flat hand between the boy's shoulder blades, and then he stopped. He left the kid standing there like a jacket he meant to come back for, and he turned, and he came back across his own floor toward me instead. A man who feels the ground move under his money goes to the loudest crack in it first. I was the loudest crack in the room. Watching him cross it, I understood that the phone in my pocket had turned, in the last 10 minutes, into the most valuable object in that house, and that he had done that arithmetic a half step ahead of me. He came in close and took the whole party off his face like a coat. What was under it was quieter and a great deal more careful, and it put a hand on my arm, light, angled so that 40 people would read two brothers patching a small thing up.
Hey, come here. Let's not do that in my house. He kept it down under the music, warm, reasonable, a man talking somebody off a ledge. I rode you too hard tonight, I know I did. The slideshow, the whole running gag, it went past funny a while back, and I kept my foot on it anyway. And that's on me. There, I said it. I'm sorry. So we're square. You took your shot back at me in front of everybody, and God knows I felt it, and now we let it lie and go cut a cake like a family. That's the whole of what I want tonight.
I said nothing, and my quiet did the one useful thing it had done all night. It made him keep talking. A man who is comfortable stops at the offer. My brother did not stop at the offer.
And here's the rest, because I'm going to be straight with you the way nobody else in this family ever is. That stuff you've been sitting on, the screenshots, the little folder, whatever it is you keep on, the whole money business, you make it go away tonight. All of it, off the phone, gone, while we're standing here. And in exchange, none of this ever happened. Clean slate, both directions. I keep taking care of Mom and Dad the way I have been. You never carry $1 of it, and the two of us never open this drawer again as long as we both live. He squeezed my arm once, brotherly. That's a good trade, little brother. That's me being more than fair with you. Take it.
I turned it over in the 2 seconds he gave me for turning, and the first thing I found was the hole in the middle of it. He had asked me to delete it. Nowhere in all that reasonableness had he asked me to delete it because it was false. He hadn't said I'd made a thing up. He hadn't said there was nothing on the phone to find. He had skipped clean over the one sentence an innocent man reaches for first and gone straight to the cleanup, and he'd done it so smoothly I nearly missed the shape of the thing that wasn't in it. You just offered to pay me to erase something you keep saying is nothing, I said.
I didn't say pay.
You said you'd keep handling theirs. That's the payment. It comes out of the same account. I kept it level, pitched for him, and no one passed his shoulder. You didn't say I was wrong, Dean. You had one clean shot just now to stand here and tell me none of it's true, and you spent it asking me to hit delete. Innocent men lead with the first thing. You led with the second.
You want to talk about true? Here's true. The warmth thinned. The reasonable stayed, but it went colder under it. You want to be the man who does this. At their age, you drag their name into a room full of people who came here to be happy. You put our mother in front of strangers over some feeling you've got. That lands on her, not me. You understand that? Whatever you think you're holding, the second you open it, it's Mom who gets asked the questions. It's Dad who has to sit there while people go through what's theirs. You want to protect them, hand me the phone, and let me protect them the way I've been doing it. Or blow it all up and watch what it does to the two people you keep telling everybody you love so much.
That was the cruelest thing he said all night, and he said it in the voice you'd use to talk a child off a fence. A man who had drained the accounts, standing in the hall of the house he bought with them, offering to shield our parents from the one who'd come to stop him. My father's $40 turned over under my ribs, the flinch when he'd asked and the shame when he'd waved it off, and I understood there was nothing left in my brother to appeal to. He'd already filed our parents under things he owned. "They're not a shield you get to hold up," I said. "You don't get to rob them and then stand in front of them so I can't reach it."
Rob. He said the word back at me like he'd bitten into something gone off. Listen to yourself. You've built a whole little religion out of one word you won't even spell out. So spell it. Say what you think happened. Right here in actual sentences, just you and me. No crowd to play it up for. What is it you think I did? He opened his hands and held them out, empty, patient, daring me to put the thing into them. You can't, can you? You've got a bad feeling and a folder of me teasing you at parties, and you've dressed the two of them up as a crime. Because the truth is, you've been jealous of this house since the night I signed for it. And jealous isn't a crime, little brother, or they'd have put you away years back.
He wanted me to say it. That was the whole of the move. Get the accusation out of my mouth here in the dark of the hall, where he could measure how much I knew against how much I was only guessing, then walk back into his party having taken the reading off me. I had spent 3 years learning what my brother did with anything I handed him. I did not hand him this. "I'm not going to argue it with you," I said. "You'll get it in sentences, just not from me, and not in this hallway."
Give me the phone.
"No."
Give me the phone and we walk back in there, and this whole night is a story we laugh about at Christmas. Don't be stupid with me. Hand it here.
"You can't delete what you already sent me." And there went the last of the party face, all of it, gone at once. He reached. Not a swing and not a shove, nothing anybody across the room could have put a name to, just a fast, low, practiced grab for the pocket of my jacket, the reach of somebody long used to taking things off people who don't fight him for them. His fingers got the corner of it. For half a second, we both had a hand on the same slab of glass in the narrow dark of that hall, his knuckles white and mine white under his, and the whole 3 years of it lived in that half second. Every clip, every caption, every soft laugh he'd banked at my back, come down to which of two brothers would let go first of a phone. I did not let go. I turned my shoulder into him the way you turn out of a hard wind, broke his grip off the corner, and I brought the phone in flat against my chest and stepped back out of his reach. Then I did the one thing he could not chase me into. I slid it inside my jacket, over my heart, where he'd have had to open my coat in front of 40 guests to get at it. He stood there a second with his empty hand still half closed around the shape of a thing that was no longer in it.
You think one person in that room takes your word over mine. He wasn't asking it. He had the host voice back on top, but it ran cold underneath now, all the warmth spent. Look around you. You brought a folder to a knife fight, little brother, and it's my house, my friends, my night. Go on and play whatever you think you've got. Then count how many people are still standing next to you when the music stops.
He held it the extra beat he held everything, and then he remembered the boy he'd parked by the glass doors, and he remembered that a scene was the one luxury a man throwing his own housewarming can't afford to buy. He tucked his shirt back in where the grab had pulled it loose. He rebuilt the smile out of spare parts, and he turned and went back for the cousin. It was the reaching that undid him. For 3 years I had scrolled that archive end to end, the posts up top where he'd made them public, his texts underneath where he'd sent them to me alone. But only ever the one direction, down. I'd never set the posts against the texts and matched them date for date. I'd had no cause to. I'd kept it the way I keep everything, filed and dated and never once asked to explain itself. But a man does not lunge across his own hallway for a thing that only makes him look small. He'd shown me with his own hand that the phone held something worse than an old joke, so I stood in the mouth of that hall while he walked away from me, and this time I did not read it down. I laid the posts beside the texts, and for the first time in 3 years I read it across. The posts ran 3 years deep, each one stamped with the day he'd put it up. The texts ran alongside, his own words, each stamped the night he'd sent it. I dragged them past each other, thumb in one column and then the other, and a shape came up out of the dates the way a face comes up out of a crowd once you already know it's in there. The public cruelty came in weather. It didn't scatter where a bored man's meanness would scatter it. It bunched, 3 or 4 brutal weeks, then a long, flat calm, then another bunch, and every bunch of it sat inside the same month as one of his texts. The cake year, the worst stretch of all of it, that month, a text. The week he ran me at the block party until even his own friends went quiet, that month, another. Over and over down 3 years, the loud public shaming and the quiet private gloating dated to the same handful of weeks, again and again, and there under my thumb was the one he'd sent the night he plainly felt cleverest of all, the broke brother nobody would ever think to check, that being, in his own hand, the whole entire point of me. He had not been mocking me because he was cruel and had a free evening on his hands. He'd been mocking me on a schedule. The humiliation ran to a calendar, and the calendar was sitting in his own outbox. And every single time he had needed the family to look at me and see a fool, he had sat down and built them a fresh reason to. I was holding 3 years of my own worst nights in the palm of one hand, and not one of them had ever been about me. They were cover. They were laid down in public month over month on top of something that had been moving underneath the whole time in the dark. Ruth's flat sentence came back and dropped into the dates like a key going home in a lock. The money changed, and only one set of hands was ever near it. I lifted my eyes off the screen. Across the width of the bright main room, my brother had collected the cousin back off the glass, an arm slung around the soft shoulders again, walking him the last few feet out onto the dark of the patio, where the music went thin and the light gave out at the edge of the deck. He had shaken me off and gone looking exactly as before, for a quiet place to set his hands and his mouth. He was not thinking about my phone anymore. He'd decided it was beaten or hidden or a bluff, and he'd swept it out of his mind the same brisk way he swept out everything he'd already settled about me. So he did not think about it at all when I closed the archive and left the recorder running underneath it, the way it had been running quietly under everything all night, and slid the phone back inside my jacket, live, its small counter still climbing. He was already through the patio doors, already bent down to the cousin's ear with his back to the glass and the whole lit room behind him, telling the boy some warm and private thing in the one corner of his brand-new house, where he was certain nobody worth worrying about could hear him. I gave him the count of 5. Then I came off the wall and started after him for the open patio doors, the recorder live against my heart under the jacket. Every word he was about to spend out there, he'd be spending straight into it. The patio was the one part of the house the party had not reached. Behind me, the glass held the light and the music in the way a tank holds water, and out here there was only the deck, the black yard past the deck, and my brother's back. He had walked the soft cousin all the way to the far rail, where the last of the string lights gave out and the grass went to nothing, and he had an arm slung over the boy's shoulders the way a man drapes an arm across a thing he already owns. I came out the unhurried way, the way you come out for air, hands in my pockets, my face turned to the dark of the yard and not to the two of them, because a man who looks gets seen, and a man who wanders out to breathe is furniture. I made myself furniture, and against my ribs, under the jacket, the phone they have spent 3 years telling me to put away, the one my brother built a whole running joke out of, the houseboy always fiddling with his phone, sat quiet and awake, taking down every word he had no idea he was spending. It was colder out here than the party had let anyone believe, the raw cold that lifts off a new lawn no one has lived on yet, and the two of them stood in it easy, my brother and his chosen boy. He has always needed a smaller audience than the loud one. Some soft single face to lean down into and tell the truth to, once he is sure it is the only face there is to catch it. He had found tonight's, and he had walked it out past the last of the light on purpose, and he did not once think to wonder why the brother he'd grabbed at for the phone a few minutes ago would drift out into the same dark, holding nothing to do with his hands. He had clocked me come out. I felt his eyes cross me once, the way you glance at a chair somebody left in a doorway and then move off me, and that was the whole reading he took. He had beaten me in the hall, or he believed he had, and the phone was a bluff, or he believed it was, and there was nothing left in me worth dropping his voice for. So he did not drop it. He kept on with the boy in the same warm, unhurried pour he used on everyone he happened to be in the middle of taking something from, a man teaching a favored young cousin how the world was actually put together.
You want to know how a house like this really happens, since you're old enough to hear it. Everybody stands in that kitchen and thinks it's the money. It isn't the money. The money's the easy part. I've been moving Mom and Dad's money for years, a little at a stretch, the size of little that no bank ever blinks at, and no one at a dinner table ever thinks to add up, because who counts? Who's going to sit there and audit two old people who trust their own son? Nobody. The hard part was never the moving. The hard part is the story you build around it, and you build that years ahead of when you need it. You find the one person in the family that nobody's ever going to believe, and then you spend every holiday, every party, making dead sure they go on not believing him. You keep him small, you make him the punchline. And once you've done that right, he can stand up in a full room one day with every true thing in both his hands, and it lands on nothing, because as long as everyone thinks you're the screw-up, you'll never get a hearing. That's the whole game. That's my brother, right there in the dark. He could walk inside this minute and say all of it out loud, and they'd hand him a beer and tell him to go sit down.
The cousin laughed the small, unsure laugh of a boy who has just been handed something heavier than he asked for and doesn't yet know it's live. I kept breathing like a man bored by the cold. In the hallway, I had only been able to read it off the dates, a shape I was nearly sure of and could not yet prove. Now he was saying it out loud, in his own mouth, on his own deck. He had put the word money and the word years in the same breath, and he had not even dropped his voice to do it. He believed he was untouchable because he had spent 3 years making me unbelievable. He was half right, and half was not going to be enough. My brother felt me still standing off the dark end of the rail, and it did not cost him a thing, because he had already filed me undersettled.
Isn't that right, little brother? You can come out of the shadows. Nobody's filming.
I did not answer him. Answering was the single thing that would have told him there was a man out here worth answering, and I had spent 3 years being nobody to his face on purpose. I stayed furniture until he turned back to the boy and lowered his head to say the next warm thing, and then I walked off the black end of the patio and came in through the side door. And in the little unlit hall by the coats, I did the one thing in that whole minute that mattered. I opened the file while it was still warm, and I did not play it. I sent it. To my own mail, to the drive I have kept the way my grandfather kept his Sunday voicemails, and to Ruth, 3 copies gone out into 3 separate places in less time than it takes to snatch a phone out of one hand. My grandfather never once gave a reason for saving those messages. He just sat at his kitchen table on Sundays and let the old recorded voices run through one after the next, and I grew up thinking that was a plain and ordinary thing a man did with what people left behind. Tonight, it was 3 copies instead of 1 drawer. A few minutes back in that hall, he'd gotten his knuckles white on the corner of this same phone and come away with an empty hand. There was less than nothing here for him to grab at now, because the one thing he'd want gone was already resting in 3 separate rooms his arm would never reach into. Ruth was where the hall led out by the pantry, her back set against a door that shut, her own phone dark in her palm, and her thumb resting on it like a finger holding a place in a book. I crossed to her, and I did not say anything first. I lifted my phone to her ear and let my brother tell her himself, in his own warm, party-adjacent voice, the part about moving the money for years. I watched it go into her the way that caption 3 years ago had never once gone into any of them. No flinch, no lift, just a fact walking in and taking a seat. She listened to the whole of it, and then she made me play it again, and she listened to the whole of it twice. Then she handed the phone back and looked at the dark screen of her own for a second before she spoke.
What hope do you have against me? I told you in that kitchen the money that ought to be in your parents' accounts isn't there, and I told you I know the shape of that account to within a few $100. So I'm going to give you the number once, because you're going to hear it a single time tonight, and then you and I are going to stop saying it where a wall can carry it. What hope do you have against me? What's gone from the 2 of them over the stretch he just called years on his own back deck comes to about $340,000.
She let it sit in the hall between us, and she did not soften it or repeat it, and I understood she'd said it once on purpose. the way you set a heavy thing down once and don't pick it up again to show people how heavy it is. That's every dollar they have, I said.
What hope do you have against me? That's most of a life. And here is the part I've been standing in this pantry doing in my head while you were outside, because a man who says the word years about his own mother's money is not describing one weeknight he'd take back. Your father's aunt, the widow, 88 years old and grateful past sense for anybody who'll drive out and sit an afternoon with her. What hope do you have against me? Dean took over helping her with her banking about the same season your parents' statements started reaching me late and in his handwriting instead of clean from the bank. I don't have her paper in front of me tonight, and I don't need it in front of me to know exactly what I'd find on it. It's the same small, careful pieces under the same one hand, moving the same quiet direction. She turned her phone face up in her palm. What hope do you have against her? And it was never just your parents.
And there it was, the whole thing changing size in my hands while I stood still. For 3 years I had carried one cruelty and thought of it as mine. A caption, a nickname, a brother with a mean streak, and a camera. It was not one cruelty. It was a method, and it had been built to be used more than once, and it was still running tonight, in the present tense, on a woman who was my father's own aunt, a widow who trusted the one nephew who ever drove out to sit an afternoon with her and never once thought to tally what thinned in her account while he sat. He had done the same to her with the same 2 hands he had used on our parents, and he was upstairs right now pouring for 40 people who loved him for it. Then it isn't a story anymore, I said. It's a pattern.
What hope do you have against me? Pattern is the right word. It's also the word that turns this out of something you and I happen to know by a pantry door and into something with a file number and people whose whole job is to pull that file and read it. I started this the minute I stepped out of that kitchen, with the after-hours line already up in my hand. What I didn't have, until 2 minutes ago, was one solid thing to carry. What hope do you have against me? A worried son and a run of late statements don't open a case. His voice does. The second they hear him lay the word years on his own mother's money, my suspicion becomes their file, a criminal one. So here is your part be a son at your brother's party, and you touch nothings, and you play nothing, and you let me set the first brick where it belongs.
He stood in that hall and dared me to say it, all of it, in sentences he could measure. I told him he'd get it in sentences, just not from me.
What hope do you have against me? He said it himself, in his own voice, on his own back deck. That's the only version of it that was ever going to hold.
It was a strange thing to be handed at a pantry door in the middle of a party, the plain certainty that the worst hour of my brother's life was already on its way to him down a line I couldn't see, and that not 1 inch of it needed the room's leave. Somewhere on the far end of that line was a stranger whose quiet evening was about to take on my brother's name, and behind that stranger, a file that would outlast every caption he had ever thumbed at my face. It did not need 40 people to vote on whether I was finally allowed to be right about something. For 3 years, I had stood in the middle of that family waiting on a verdict from people who were never going to hand me one. What Ruth was dialing did not require them, and I felt the waiting go out of me like a breath I'd been holding since I was 35. She was already lifting the phone back up off her palm, the after-hours number still open on the dark glass where she'd left it waiting since the kitchen. The screen lit the flat, unhurried lines of her face. She turned her shoulder to the room and put the phone to her ear, and I heard the first small tone of it begin to ring out somewhere on the other end of the county before she'd even finished turning away from me. Inside, through the glass, the party had changed shape without me in it. Dean had come off the patio a step ahead of me, and he was back in the middle of his own floor, moving glass to glass, his voice climbing up over the music the easy way it climbed over everything in that house. He tapped a ring against a stem, hushing a near corner of the room just long enough to drop a tease. Not the toast, not yet. Only the promise of it, salted in early so nobody wandered off toward their coats. Save room, everybody. Don't drift off on me. There's a special thank you coming before the night is done. 40 people warmed to it the way a room warms to the man who bought it, and drifted back to their glasses to wait him out. I stood at the edge of all that bright, easy noise with a live confession sitting in 3 places on the air, and not 1 second of it played for a living soul. and across the whole width of it. Past her husband working the room like a man with all the time in the world, Danielle was looking straight at me, only at me, and her face had already gone the exact color of a person who has just, a moment too late, done the arithmetic and come up with my brother's number. All night the trouble had come at my brother from the outside, from me at the ragged edge of his party, from a gray-headed woman he had never once thought to worry about standing quiet by his own pantry door. It did not come from the outside now. Danielle crossed her own bright floor toward me with a wine glass in her hand she had plainly forgotten she was carrying, and she did not take the long, polite loop around the room to keep it looking like two in-laws happening to meet. She came straight up the middle, past the cousin, past the two neighbors, past the cake she had set out herself, and she stopped close enough that I could see she had gone past, frightened into something flatter and steadier than fear. She had done her arithmetic out there while her husband worked his guests, and she had come up with the same number I had, and she had discovered where her own name was sitting inside it.
The down payment on this house was more money than the two of us have ever had at one time. I knew that the day we signed. I told myself he'd sold the truck. I told myself a bonus. I told myself whatever he said in front of me to tell myself, because that is a thing my husband is very good at, handing you the sentence you're going to say to yourself later. She kept her voice down under the music, level the way a person keeps a voice level only by holding it very hard. 2 weeks ago a form came to the house for me to sign, and he stood at my shoulder and folded the top of the page back with 2 fingers while I put my name on the bottom, and I signed it, because that is the whole shape of the last 10 years. I sign the bottom and he keeps the top. Every account is in my name and not his. Do you understand what I am standing here telling you? Whatever is wrong with your parents' money, his name is nowhere near it. Mine is on all of it.
She had not come to me empty. She reached into the small bag on her shoulder and brought out 3 pages she had printed sometime in the last half hour, folded once down the middle, the fold still sharp and warm from her hand, and she pressed them flat against my chest until my fingers came up and took them the way you take a thing you are not going to be allowed to give back.
That's 3 months of one account. My name is across the top of every page. Read the withdrawals and you will see they are not withdrawals I made because I have never in my life moved money I couldn't watch land. The login is on the back in my own handwriting. You use it tonight, before it crosses his mind to change it on me. She held the last of it a second, and when it came quiet and without 1 ounce of performance in it. I didn't know. I need you to hear me say that once with my own mouth, here, while I can still say it, because after tonight not one person in my life is ever going to believe I didn't. I didn't know.
I looked down at the top page long enough to see it was true. Her name, where a name goes, and under it a column of money leaving on days she had been across town or asleep. He had not merely spent the 2 of them out of their savings and bought this house with the loss. He had built the whole thing to fall on her if it ever fell. Every dollar he moved wore her name on the way out the door, so that on the day the floor finally gave, it would be Danielle standing over the hole with the pen still in her hand, and my brother a full arm's length back, sad and blameless, a good man betrayed by the woman he'd trusted with the books. He had married her, and then he had turned her into his exit. She had figured it out at her own party, in the middle of the toast she was throwing for the house it bought, and she had walked across the room and handed the exit to me. Look at me a second. I kept my voice as far down as she was keeping hers. You just walked the whole length of your own party and set the one thing in my hand that shows which way you were standing when the floor went. Your name is on the front of those pages and your handwriting is on the back of them, and the back is the part that tells anybody who bothers to look that you're the one who opened the door tonight, not the one who spent 10 years leaning against it.
He is going to say I did every bit of it. He'll stand up somewhere serious and be heartbroken about me in front of people. And he is very, very good at heartbroken. I have watched him be heartbroken about you at this family's table for years, and every single one of them bought it.
I know precisely what he's good at. I have been the thing he's good at. I tipped my head an inch toward the window. You are not carrying this alone, and you are not carrying it in the dark. Go stand by your Aunt Lorraine, keep your hands exactly where they are, and let me set the rest of it down where it goes. She went. and I watched her cross back through her own guests with her chin level and her ruined glass still in her hand, a woman walking the last few steps of a marriage without a single person in the room able to see that she was. There was one more person under that roof who could tell me the rest of it, and she was parked in the good chair by the window with a plate on her knees she wasn't eating from. My great-aunt Lorraine was 88 years old and had come the whole way out to a young man's housewarming because young people asking her anywhere at all was a kindness she would not miss for the world. I crouched down on my heels by the arm of her chair so she wouldn't have to lift her chin, and I kept my voice easy, a nephew making talk. Dean's been driving out to sit with you and help with the banking, hasn't he?
Oh, he has been so good to me about it. Since my husband passed, I can't make one bit of sense out of those statements they send, page after page, all that small print, and I sit there with my glasses and just can't. Dean comes out every few weeks and sits at the kitchen table with me and puts the whole of it in order, pays what wants paying, and I make him a sandwich for the road. Her hands moved a little on the plate. There were a time or two the balance looked lower than I had it in my head it ought to be. I asked him about it, one of those times. He explained it right off, some fee, some moving of money from the one account into the other. I couldn't tell you now which he said. And he's so quick and sure with it, and I'm so slow with the numbers these days that I felt foolish for the asking. So I didn't ask the next time. I wasn't going to be the old aunt who can't keep her own checkbook straight, ringing up a busy man to fuss at him over what was most likely nothing but my own poor memory. He is family. He drives the better part of an hour each way to do it.
I told her it was good of him because she needed to hear that from somebody and because the true thing would keep. And I stood back up out of the crouch with the whole of it confirmed in the same 2 sentences my parents' loss had come in. Same patient hand at the same kitchen table. Same small, careful pieces going quietly in the same direction, month over month, under a woman who kept still about the holes so as not to be a bother to the nice young man who drove all that way. She had not been robbed by a stranger who broke a window. She had been robbed by the only person who ever came to sit with her, and she had thanked him for the company, and she would keep thanking him right up until somebody with the standing to do it made her stop. And that was the whole cruelty of where I stood in that room. Everything had turned. His own wife had crossed the floor and put the proof in my hands. His own aunt had told me the shape of it in her own kind voice without once knowing she'd told me anything. The recording sat live in 3 places on the air where he could never reach it, and Ruth was somewhere off the main room with a line ringing on the other end of the county. Every last piece had come home, and not one soul in that bright, loud house knew a single thing about any of it but me. To the 40 people warming their glasses, my brother was the man who bought the room, and I was the bitter younger one his own family had spent 3 years learning to look past. If I stood up now with my parents' attorney and a folder and a feeling, on his floor, on his night, before he had put one wrong word into the air himself, every head in the place would read it exactly the way he had spent years teaching them to. The screw-up finally throwing his tantrum, ambushing a generous man at his own housewarming. He was 30 feet away and rising, a fork already loose in his fingers, seconds from the version of the night where he owned every person in it. The truth was total, and it was silent. And silent it was still his to lose me under. That was the trap in holding everything and airing nothing, and I had spent the whole party walking toward it without quite letting myself name the drop at the far side of it. Everything I'd gathered was still folded in my inside pocket, and there, on his floor, in front of a room that had settled the matter of me at the door, it was not proof of anything. It was just the Bitter Brothers folder, the exact man Dean had spent years drawing for them, and the closer I came to having all of it, the more perfectly I fit the picture he'd painted of the moment I would try. He had not only emptied our parents and staged his wife to fall for it, he had built in advance the face the room would make when I finally opened my mouth, and he had made 40 people practice that face on me until they could do it without thinking. Standing in his kitchen light, with his wife's pages against my heart, I understood that everything I'd gathered would land as an ambush the instant it left me 1 second too early, and land as the truth the instant it left him. So I did not stand up, and I did not reach for anything. I did the small mechanical work a man does when he has decided the room is a stage and means to choose where every piece of it stands before the curtain moves. I folded Danielle's 3 pages once more and slid them deep into the inside pocket, buttoned over the phone, and I felt the 2 of them settle there together. Then I went and got my mother and my father up out of the low couch by the loudspeaker where the crowd would fold in on them, and I walked them, one at each of my arms and no hurry showing, over to the 2 straight-backed chairs nearest the side door and nearest Ruth's empty place, out past the edge of wherever the noise was about to break. My father let himself be moved and looked at me once, and I gave him nothing to read but a son finding his parents a better seat. I brought the recording up on the phone in my pocket by feel, thumb walking the dark glass until the one file I wanted was the thing a single touch would open, and I left it there, breathing, one press from a voice. Across the room, Ruth was still turned half away toward the hall, the phone tight against her ear, not yet back among us, the last piece still out of my hands and moving on its own. I checked the 2 chairs one last time with my eyes. My mother and father set a clean stretch of floor back from the cake table, Ruth's empty place at their elbow, the side door at their backs, the whole of the coming weather aimed off the far side of them and out into the middle of the room where the man who'd made it stood. Everything in that house I had any right to move, I had moved. Danielle had drifted to the arm of her Aunt Lorraine's chair, and she caught all of it, and her whole body asked me now, do it now, before I found her a look. "Not yet," I said, low only for her. "Let him finish pouring." Ruth found me by the drink table, slid her phone back into her bag, and said the fraud unit's after-hours line had picked up on the second ring. Across the room, Dean tapped a fork against a glass and asked everyone to come in close for the toast to the new house. He wanted one more shot of the valet. I was going to give him a better one. He had the whole room in his hand before he said a word. He tapped the fork against the stem a second time, and the music went out under somebody's palm at the wall, and 40 faces turned in off their own conversations, toward the middle of his bright new floor the way faces turned toward the man who paid for the floor they're standing on. He let them settle. He had been salting this moment in all night, a promise held back so nobody wandered off to their coats. And now that it was here, he was not going to spend it in a hurry. He found me at the rim of the crowd, off by the cake table where I had put myself on purpose. And he smiled the smile he had been landing on me at this family's tables for 3 years, warm on the top and flat underneath, and he lifted one open hand and called me up into the middle of it all.
Come up here, little brother. Don't be shy. Everybody here's friendly. Before anyone so much as looks at that cake, I've got one more thank you to hand out, and this one is earned. You all know him. Some of you have known him longer than you've known me. And whatever the job is, however small, however far he has to drive to get to it, my little brother shows up and he does it, and I think a man ought to hear that said about him out loud, in a room with people watching. So.
I came up. That was the part he had never once had to worry about. That I would come when he called me into the open, because I always had, and he had built a whole 3 years on the certainty that I always would. He reached into his shirt pocket and brought out the bill folded twice, green, creased hard down the middle. The way you fold money you want a man to feel in his fist before he ever gets it open. And he pressed it into my palm and closed my own fingers over it with both of his hands, gentle, the way you'd help an old man hold a cup.
For the valet. Come on, give it up for him. He's been running this whole thing tonight. Hauling chairs, parking cars, keeping the help humble. Let's hear it.
And they gave it up. 40 people put their hands together in that room because the man who owned it told them to, and a few of them laughed the easy laugh. You laugh when the host makes the joke and the joke costs you nothing, and Dean lifted his phone to get the shot, already certain of what my face was going to do. The flush, the swallow, the good sport grin that lets a room off the hook for laughing. He had it framed before I'd finished closing my hand on his 20. He was already sure how it was going to look. I thanked him. That's generous of you, Dean, it really is. I said it out loud, so the near half of the room could hear that I'd said it, and I watched a flicker of something cross his eyes, because thanking him was not in the picture he had framed. Then I turned away from his phone, and I crossed the 4 feet to where the kid who had actually parked the cars all night was standing against the wall with a tray he'd been told to carry, maybe 16, and not sure whether he was allowed to stand in the good part of the room, and I put the folded 20 in his hand and closed his fingers on it the way Dean had closed mine. "You parked every car on that street tonight. This is yours. I didn't earn $1 of it, and you did." That got a laugh, too. A smaller one. A confused one. The sound a room makes when it can't tell yet whether the thing that just happened was allowed to be funny and looks to the host to find out. I am the younger son. I have spent my whole life reading that exact sound off the tops of rooms. While they were still deciding, I set my phone face up on the cake table next to the long knife laid out for the cake, and I turned it a quarter so the speaker faced out at the guests and not down at the cloth. Dean watched me do it. He watched the whole small piece of business, the phone, the table, the little turn of my wrist. And I saw him decide it was nothing. The houseboy and his phone. There was nothing on it that he had to be afraid of, because he had spent 3 years making certain that nothing I set down in a room could weigh anything once I'd set it there. He came down off the toast a half step and leaned his head in close to mine, close enough that his breath moved, and he dropped his voice under the crowd noise to the register he only ever used on me, the one with no warmth left in it at all.
You're not going to do a thing, and you know why. I knew exactly what I was doing every time for years. Who was ever going to believe the valet? That was the whole point of the valet.
There it was, said to my face, in the flat voice, 1 arm's length from a table of people who loved him. He had said as much to a soft cousin on his own patio an hour before, and never once thought the wind might carry it. Now he'd said it twice in one night, to 2 people he was certain could do nothing with it, and he straightened back up to his full height and turned to give the room the warm version of his face again, the host's face, already reaching for the next line of his toast. I pressed the green triangle. His voice came out of the phone on the table. It was his voice. There was no mistaking it for anyone else's. Every person in that room had known it their whole lives. But it was not the voice he used at parties. It was the flat one. The one he had just used on me and thought only I could hear. It came up out of the little speaker and spread out flat across the room over the cake and over the folded hands, unhurried. A man explaining to a boy how the world was really put together.
I've been moving Mom and Dad's money for years.
The laugh he had started never made it to the end of the first sentence. I watched it die on 40 faces at once, not all together, but in a spreading way. The near ones first, and then the far ones, the way frost takes a window from the corners in. A woman by the window stopped with her glass halfway down. Tyler, my cousin, who had reposted the houseboy bit louder than anyone in this room 3 years running, went very still with his own phone dark in his hand and his mouth a little open. And in the middle of it, my brother's own recorded voice kept coming, patient, sure of itself, sure it was alone. Because on that patio, it had believed it was alone. And a recording does not know the room has changed. It just keeps telling the truth into the new silence in the same warm, certain voice it used in the dark. Dean reached for the phone. Of course he did. It was the only move left in him. The same grab he'd made once already tonight and missed, his hand coming down open toward the table to make it stop. His fingers found his own wine glass instead, the one he'd set down by the knife to free his hands for the toast. And it went over. The stem caught the glass tabletop wrong and cracked clean through with a small, dry sound that carried in that silence louder than the recording did, and the bowl of it rolled a half-turn on the glass and stopped, and the wine ran out across the glass and off the edge, and nobody moved to catch it. He left it. There was nowhere to put his hand that would help him now. Across the room, the slideshow he'd been running all evening ticked to its next slide and froze there, stuck, and it froze on the one he'd built the whole night around. My face 3 years ago with the cake in my 2 hands and his own words laid across it in white letters, my brother, the houseboy. His own caption, holding still and lit up on the wall above his head, while his own voice told the room what the caption had really been for. And then he found his voice, or the front half of it, the way a man finds his footing on ice by the fact that he's already going down. He turned to the room and put both hands up and reached for the tone he used to steer them, but it came out with the bottom missing.
Okay. Okay, everybody, hold on. Hold on a second. That is cut together, all right? That is chopped up. That is out of context. That is not what it sounds like. You want to know what's actually happening here? He has been walking around my house all night, with a phone recording every person in this room. That's the crime. That is a felony right there, what he just did to me. Somebody, one of you say something. Tyler. Tyler, you were laughing with me 2 minutes ago. Tell him what he's like.
Nobody said something. Tyler looked at the floor. 40 people looked at my brother and let the silence be the answer, and his own voice on the table kept running underneath the plea, calm and certain and his, saying the thing he was standing there swearing he hadn't said. Ruth came off the wall by my parents and crossed into the open without hurrying, a purse on her shoulder and 62 years of not being rushed by anybody in her carriage. And she stopped beside the cake table where the whole room could see her, and she did not raise her voice because she had never in her life needed to.
What hope do you have against me? I'm your parents' attorney, and my name is Ruth Calloway, and I want every person in this room to hear that I came here tonight as a guest, and I am not leaving as one.
She held her hand out to me, palm up. My phone stayed where it was, face up on the cake table with the recording still running out of it into the room, 3 years of his own dated posts and his own dated messages sitting quiet in it behind the voice. And into her open hand, I set the one piece of it that was paper, the account pages Danielle had pressed to my chest a few minutes ago, and Ruth closed her fingers around them and drew them in against her side where they belonged to the case now and not to me. Then she lifted her own phone, dark in her other hand, where a line had been open and waiting since the kitchen, and she turned it face up and pressed it once and set it on the cake table next to mine so both of them faced the room.
This is Nadia Serrano, Fraud Unit, After Hours Desk. I've had a report open on this house since earlier tonight, and I've been on this line long enough to hear the voice on that table say it in his own words. So on the strength of that, as of this minute, there is a hold on every account tied to these two names. The parents and the sons both. Nothing leaves any of them. Not tonight, not Monday, not by any signature, his or anyone's. We're going to walk every transfer back to the first day it moved. And I want the man whose voice that is to hear me say he is not to touch $1 of it before we get there.
My brother turned toward Ruth then, off the room and on to the one person in it who had known this family long enough to be worked, and the ice went out from under him fully, and what was left was just a man reaching.
Ruth, come on. You've sat at holidays with us for a decade. You know him. You know what he's like. You know he's been jealous of me since we were kids. He's been circling this family for years, waiting for a night exactly like.
What hope do you have against me? I do know him. He's the one who drives your mother to her appointment. Sit down, Dean.
Ruth let that sit in the room the length of a breath. Then she reached into her bag and brought out a single folded sheet she had printed at some point in the last hour, and she crossed the last few feet to my brother and held it out to him, and she waited until his hand came up on its own and took it. Because a thing put in your hand is harder to say you never got.
What hope do you have against me? That's your copy. It's the referral I'm filing tonight with Adult Protective Services on behalf of your mother, your father, and your great-aunt Lorraine, who is 88 and who you have been driving out to help with her banking. What hope do you have against me? In the days after tonight, that referral leaves my hands and goes to the county, and what comes back from the county has names I want you to sit with. Forgery and exploitation of vulnerable adults, more than one of them. Nobody is serving you anything at your own door tonight. What hope do you have against me? That part comes in its own time, and it comes on paper, and it will have your name on the top of it, which is more than you ever let a page have when you folded the top down and left your wife to sign the bottom.
She turned back toward my parents once to check them with her eyes, and then she gave my brother the last of it in the same level voice. No rise in it anywhere. A woman reading a man his weather.
What hope do you have against me? And I'll be in front of a probate judge before the month is out to take every last thing that touches your parents' affairs out of your reach and hand it to someone neutral who has never once sat at this family's table, and to make you give back what you moved to the dollar into their care and hers. Your wife's name comes off every one of those accounts. What hope do you have against me? She signed where you folded the page down and told her to sign, and I can show a judge that's all she ever did, so you can stop building the version of tonight where she's the one holding the pen. You built all of it to fall on her. It's going to fall on you. It's going to take a while, and it's going to be thorough, and not one part of it needs a single person in this room to raise a hand and vote on whether you're allowed.
My brother stood in the middle of his own bright floor with a piece of paper in one hand and a broken glass at his feet, and 40 people looking at him the way they had spent 3 years looking at me. And he opened his mouth, and I watched him reach for the warm voice, the host's voice, the one that had always found the exact sentence to hand a room so it would decide about me the way he wanted. He found nothing. The only voice of his that was working in that house was still coming up off the table between us, telling on him in the flat register, and there is no talking over yourself. I took one step so I was level with him, close, and I said it low, only for him, the way he had said his to me a minute before. You wanted the room, keep it, they're listening now. And the room was his, the way he'd always wanted a room to be his. Every eye in it. The full-held silence of 40 people who would not look away, all of it fixed on him and none of it his to steer. There was no sound left in that house but the one he had made himself in the dark and never meant for anyone but a boy at a rail. It ran on off the table into the quiet, past the first sentence and into the next, his own patient voice starting up the second line of it while the wine spread out under his shoes.
As long as everyone thinks you're the screw-up.
And across the room, in the straight-backed chair by the side door where I had put him myself, out past the edge of all of it, my father set his plate down on his knee and put one hand on the arm of the chair and rose to his feet. He was 72 years old, and in my whole life he had never once stood up in a room to make it look at him. He did it now. He came up out of the straight-backed chair by the side door the way a man that age comes up out of any chair. One hand flat on the arm and the whole weight going down into it, and he stood a second finding his feet. While behind him, his older son's recorded voice ran on out of the phone, patient and certain and alone, telling the room the last of what it had believed no one would ever hear. Then he started across the floor. Nobody had asked him to. 40 people watched my father cross his older son's bright new floor, past the wine spreading out from under the cake table, past Dean, and he did not check his step when he came level with Dean, and he did not turn his head. And the not looking carried further than any word he owned. He came the whole way to where I stood, and he stopped at my shoulder and turned to face the room from there. And that was the entire thing. He had spent 3 years at tables where I was the joke, and he had laughed the small laugh a man laughs to keep his own house quiet, and now he had gotten up on 2 bad knees and walked the length of a room to stand on the side of it that had me on it, and every person under that roof watched him pick the spot. I reached down and stopped the recording. It had finished its work a sentence back. Dean's voice cut off between one word and the next, and the quiet that dropped in behind it was the loudest thing in the house. What came after came without much noise, the way a tide goes out. You never catch it moving, you only look up and the water's gone. Ruth had her phone off the cake table before Dean thought to reach for it, the fraud line still open on it, and I took mine up off the cloth beside it and slid it away inside my jacket. 3 years of his own dated posts, sitting quiet in it behind the recording, safe there, the way they'd ridden all night. She had copies of every last file already, 3 of them sent to her hours back from a dark hallway. She didn't need the glass in my pocket. Only the woman still live on her own. She set hers face up one last time so the room could hear the other end of it.
The hold is on all of it as of now. His, your parents, every account tied to the report. Someone from my unit will call the house Monday morning. Between now and then, nobody signs anything, and no one clears out so much as a coat closet. I have this line recorded on my end, same as you have yours.
Then the line went dead, and the room understood the way a room understands weather, that the thing it had walked into was not going to blow back out. The guests left the way. People leave a place they don't want their name near. Not all at once. In twos, finding coats, not quite catching anyone's eye at the door. A woman I didn't know set her full glass down on the windowsill, like she'd decided halfway to her mouth she didn't want to drink anything of his. Nobody thanked him for having them. And Dean stood in the middle of the floor he'd bought with money that was never his, under the one thing still lit in the room, the slideshow, frozen where it had stuck, holding the younger version of me he'd filmed carrying a cake, his caption burning white across it. And he watched 40 people he had steered his whole life decide, without a vote, without a word to him, to be somewhere else. He found me by the door on my way to get my parents' coats. He put himself in front of me and reached, one last time, for the warm voice. And it still wasn't there, and what came out had the bottom missing the same as it had missing all night.
You think this makes you something? You think they walk out of here looking at you any different than they walked in? You were always going to be the one who carries the bags, little brother. That's the whole of what tonight was. The help hauling my night out the door for me.
I know exactly what I am. I did not lean in, and I did not drop my voice, because I had nothing left to keep between just the two of us. I'm the one who shows up, and I stepped around him and went and got the coats. And I did not look back to see what his face did with that, because for the first time in 3 years, it did not matter to me what his face did. Tyler caught me at the door. My cousin, 30 years old, who had reposted the houseboy bit louder than anyone in the family 3 years running, who had a whole camera roll of me carrying things. He stood in front of me, and for a second he couldn't get the first word up his throat.
I laughed at every one of them. I added my own on top. There are captions up there tonight with my name on them that I have to go home and look at. He had his phone out, turning it over in his hand, not lifted at me, just heavy in his fingers. I heard what he said on that recording, about how nobody was ever going to believe you. And the thing that's sitting in my chest is that he was right about me. I was the proof he was right every single time I hit share.
You were a kid laughing at what the room laughed at. I said it plain, because it was true, and because he needed one hand held out and not a second man standing on him. He built the room. You lived in it.
I kept the originals. All of them, every clip he cut down to make you the joke. I've got the whole raw file, not his version. And there's one more you've never seen. Years back, before any of this started, at one of Dad's parties, he said it right at you, across the table, and the table was loud and you were already up out of your chair to go bring somebody's car around. I don't think it ever landed on you. My phone kept it.
He held the phone up between us and sent the whole of it across to mine, the raw clips, years of them, and under them one older file with a date on it from a night I half remembered, and a moment out of it I had never once heard. My own phone took it in with a single buzz against my palm, the same phone the whole family had spent 3 years calling the thing I was always fiddling with, and it filled now not with a weapon aimed at me, but with my cousin handing back everything he'd taken. I opened the last file because he was standing there wanting me to. It was an old man's voice, my father's, younger by the years in it, warm at the edges from a room full of his own people.
Don't you let them tease you out of it, son. Whatever wants doing around here, whoever wants driving, you're the one who actually shows up.
I stood in my brother's emptying house and listened to my father say, years before he would ever have thought to get up and cross a room to prove it, the exact thing I had spent 3 years being told this family believed the opposite of. Tyler didn't add anything to it. He put a hand hard on my arm once and went home to go look at what he'd posted. Danielle was the last one under that roof who wasn't blood. She had her coat on, and the family's great-aunt Lorraine's arm threaded through hers to walk the old woman out, and she stopped in front of me on the way to the door. Whatever was going to happen to the marriage had already happened hours ago, in the middle of her own party, and she carried it now the way you carry a thing you have already set down once and picked back up only to move it.
They want me in Monday to go through all of it. Which signatures are mine and which ones he made into mine with 2 fingers folding the top of the page. She glanced back once at the man standing alone under the frozen slideshow, and there was nothing left in the look. Not heat, not fear, distance. 10 years I signed the bottom of whatever he set in front of me. Monday is the first page I get to read the whole way down before my name goes on it.
Your name comes off clean. I meant it, and I wanted her to have it out of a mouth and not just off a document. The back of those pages, the login in your own handwriting, That's the part nobody can twist into your fault. You didn't cover it and you didn't smudge it. You handed it to me the minute it could still do somebody some good, and that's the part that shows what you were standing there for. That counts, Danielle. Whatever they try to hang on you Monday, that's the piece nobody gets to take back.
You put that phone of yours on speaker in a room full of my guests, and you let his own voice do the talking so none of it had to come out of me. Something that was almost the front edge of a smile crossed her and went, 10 years I was afraid of the man in the middle of that floor. And I have never in my life been so glad to be caught standing next to somebody as I was the second you set that phone down.
She took her aunt out to the cab and did not look at her husband on the way. Ruth walked the last of it out to the driveway with me, her bag over her shoulder, the referral to the county already gone off her phone into the dark. And before she got into her car, she said the one thing people in my place always end up asking without asking.
What hope do you have against me? I'll tell you where this goes, because you're going to wonder, and you're too decent to be the one to bring it up. None of it comes to you. Every dollar the court walks back out of his reach. And it will take months, and a probate judge, and Danielle's Monday, and your great-aunt's slow, kind answers about a kitchen table. Goes back where it was taken from. What hope do you have against me? Into a protected account for your mother and father's care that neither of that man's hands will ever touch again. A share into Lorraine's name for the years he sat and helped her with her banking. Not you, not me, not one soul who ever ate at that family's table. You don't get a check out of tonight, sweetheart. You get parents nobody is quietly emptying anymore.
That's the only version I ever wanted. And it was the whole truth, and she heard that it was, and she got in her car and left me the driveway. My mother and father were tired the way old people go, tired all at once, late, and they had come in my car because I was the one who'd driven the long way out to collect them, the way I was always the one. I got their coats onto them at the door. I picked my mother's bag up off the chair and my father's up off the floor beside it, one in each hand, and I walked the two of them out through the front door of that house and down the steps and out to where I'd left the car on the dark street the kid had parked all night. Nobody lifted a phone, nobody called it up onto a screen to catch how it looked. The younger son carrying the bags out to the car, the help doing the one thing the help had always done. There was no caption waiting for it and no one framing the shot and no white letters ready to go across the top. There was my mother's bag in my right hand and my father's in my left and the two of them on my arms in the cold, and it was the truest weight I'd carried all night, and it was the only part of the whole night that nobody saw. I set the bags in the trunk and closed it. My father stood by the open door of the car a moment before he lowered himself into the seat, and he looked at me the way he had looked at me from the chair, and he lifted his hand and set it on my shoulder and left it there. He didn't say the thing. He had said it once, years ago, at a table I'd already stepped away from, and my cousin had caught it and kept it safe through everything since, and it was on the phone in my pocket now if I ever needed to hear it again. His hand on my shoulder said the same thing the clip said, in the same voice, without the years in between. Then he got into the car. I drove them home the long way I had come, and I did not mind the distance once. Behind us, my brother's house got small in the mirror, and then went around the corner and was gone, and the door of it stayed shut the whole way. And I did not slow for it, and I did not turn the car around. He has my number. He has always had my number. It does not ring. My father's hand was warm on my shoulder the rest of that night. Or it wasn't, and I only carried the feeling of it. And either way, I have not once wished the weight of those two bags off my arms. So I'll leave it with you the way it was left with me, out on a cold street with the party going quiet behind me. If you had spent 3 years being the joke a family told at the table, and you had kept every receipt without a word, and the room finally went silent on its own, what would you have done? Until next time.